I see the presence of
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you, Chair.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you so much, Member Baku. Mr. Njalo, can you hear me?
Good morning, Chair.
Thank you so much. Just 2 minutes. I'm just waiting for the provincial officials to walk in. They're on the floor already. Just a minute or so. Thank you. Just a minute after 9, let's get started. Let me greet you, all members, all officials. My name is Dan Plato, Chairperson of the Standing Committee, Social Development. And I also want to greet everyone online with us. But let me do the honors to say to the members, please introduce yourself. First, the member with me here in the chamber.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Christopher Fly. I'm a member of this committee.
The members online, please. Member Bosman.
Good morning, Chairperson, and good morning, colleagues. My name is Gillian Bosman, and I'm a member of this committee.
Thank you so much. Member Kasim.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Aisha Kasim, and I'm a member of this committee. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Member Vance.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ayanda Vance.
Thank you so much, and to the little one as well. Honourable Member Van Vogel, please.
Good morning, Chair and colleagues. My name is Member Van Vogel, Rachel Van Vogel.
Thank you so much, Member Baku.
Thank you, Chairperson. My name is Domzalele Gladys Babu. I'm the member of this committee. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honourable Member. And let me go to the officials quickly. Our NCOP officials. Yes, sir, you may, Mr. Njadu.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. I'm Edward Njadu. I'm permanent delegate to the National Council of Provinces. I'm representing the National Council of Provinces. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Njadu, do you have any other officials with you, or is it you alone?
No, I'm coming with the department, Chair.
Thank you so much. Let me welcome them as well. Do you have any specific names for us, just for our registry?
They can.
Yeah, there's a gentleman.
Yes, okay. They can give to them, Chair, to introduce themselves. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, honourable members, Chair, and the department. This is the Acting Director General from the Department of Social Development National. My name is Peter Nishpare. I'm with a team that is responsible for this bill, and I will ask them to introduce themselves one by one.
Thank you. Mai.
Good morning, Honourable Chairperson, members of the Provincial Legislature. My name is Brenda Sibego. I am responsible for comprehensive social security policy at the GST. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I see there's another person. That's a familiar face.
Good morning, Honourable Chair, Honourable members, and the team from the department. I'm Ruyanda Mchochisa, responsible for the drafting and development of legislation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good to see you once again. And then let me get back to in-house with me, departmental officials from the Department of Social Development, please.
Good morning, Chair, committee members and colleagues. My name is Marion Johnson. I'm the Chief Director for Business Planning and Strategy.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, committee members. My name is Abdul Raouf Raycliffe. I'm at the Department of Social Development, Capacity Building of MPOs. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. I don't see any members of the public with us, any interested groups, any NGOs and CBOs. Maybe some of them might want to join later. But as we go along, we will check up on that. The reason for this very important meeting is the purpose is a briefing by the National Department of Social Development on the Fundraising Amendment Bill B29B/2020 and to be executed by the NCOP. And I welcome the the National Department's delegates already. I'm not sure. I think it's led by the Honourable Mr. Njadu. Mr. Njadu, you and your team will take for the next couple of minutes the process forward with us to enlighten us on the bill, to make your necessary opening remarks, and also to give us the necessary presentation with regard to the contents of the bill, what are the changes, and whatever goes along with the bill. Mr. Njadu, all yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Good morning to all the members. And Chairperson, the National Council of Provinces, let me just give the background of the bill and also the amendment of the bill, and then I will give to the department to give us the content of the amendment of the bill. The bill is a bill for provinces. Chairperson, in terms of how far we are with the bill, is that the National Assembly has passed the fundraising amendment bill and sent it to the National Council of Provinces for deliberation, which happened yesterday. We had a select committee meeting yesterday, and we have engaged on the amendment of the bill. And now we are engaging provinces for negotiating mandates. And that's why we are here today, Chairperson. And then without any further delay, Chair, is then to give to the department to lead us in terms of the...
Thank you, Mr. Njadu. The department will proceed. So if you are ready, you may proceed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're just loading the presentation so that you can follow. And then we will ask Advocate Muchochisa to take us through the bill. Over to you, sir.
No problem.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members. Good morning once again. I would have appreciated to get there in the legislature, Honorable Chair, physically, but the diary is so packed. My 1,000 apologies for that. So basically, the bill that is before us today is the fundraising amendment bill stemming from the Fundraising Act of 1978. You will have noticed, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, that this piece of legislation is very old. It is like 45 years old, if my calculation is correct. And so many things have happened in between. And so many other pieces of legislation have also been passed. So we need to review this piece of legislation so that it is able to respond to the current situation in the country. About in a nutshell, Honorable Members, the contents of this presentation are along the lines of the contextual background for the amendment, the problem statement that actually led us to the review of this piece of legislation, the current financial status of the funds that this bill seeks to repeal and introduce a new fund, the strategic focus of the bill, the overall purpose of the bill itself, the provisions that are in the current legislation, that is the 1978 piece of legislation, which we seek to amend by means of this bill, and the summary of the clauses that are in the proposed bill and the recommendation that we'll be making to your good selves, Honorable Chair. So, this bill, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, as I've just indicated, is in terms of the Fundraising Act that was passed in 1978. So in the early 70s, the apartheid government established this piece of legislation called the Fundraising Act 107 of 1978 in order to provide for the social relief services to the white minority in the country at the time. The monies accumulated in the various funds were dispersed to mainly the white communities who were allegedly affected by disasters, acts of terrorism, acts of social violence, and refugees who supported the regime. Furthermore, the declaration of disaster was confined to the then South Africa with the exclusion of the so-called homelands. As a result, only few people benefited from the relief services to the exclusion of the majority in the country at the time. So with that in mind, we must also take note that democracy kicked in, and in this view, following the democracy, the Department of Social Development was tasked with a mandate to develop safety nets to cushion the vulnerable communities against the impact of food insecurity and vulnerability due to life exigencies. To this end, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, there's a severe impact to communities that get to be exposed to the challenges of hazards and risks that culminate into a disaster due to lack of disaster relief and mitigation programs. Necessitated that this bill be brought to your attention for processing. So we must also recognize that the need for uniformity of the approach in terms of the Disaster Management Act of 1957 called for the development of a national disaster management framework to provide a coherent, transparent, and inclusive policy on disaster risk management that is appropriate for South Africa as a whole. Again, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, you must take into account that the contents of the National Disaster Management Framework are far-reaching and based on the requirements of the Disaster Management Act. So the Disaster Management Act gives explicit priority to the application of the principle of cooperative governance for the purpose of disaster risk management, and the emphasis on the involvement of all stakeholders in strengthening the capabilities of national, provincial, and municipal organs of state to reduce the likelihood and severity of disasters. We must also take into account, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, that the Disaster Management Act of 2002, that is Act number 57, and the National Disaster Management Framework of 2005 enjoin us and all government departments to contribute towards disaster risk mitigation projects. However, the Fundraising Act is presently silent on issues of disaster risk mitigation, which is another reason for bringing this legislation to your attention for process. processing, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, in order to close that gap. So as a result of the legislative gap that I've just referred to, the Department of Social Development has to embark on a fundraising drive by approaching both the private and public sectors in order to deal with issues of short-term relief and sustainable development. So it is therefore prudent for the fundraising act to be amended with a view to introduce the Disaster Relief and National Social Development Fund. By doing so, it would also address issues of disaster risk mitigation that are part of the requirements as enjoined by the Disaster Management Act of 2002 and other related disaster management programs. Over and above, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, the proposed amendment to the disaster, that is to the Fundraising Act, will also bring about the dissolution of various funds that are available in order to streamline the governance and strengthening the efficiency of services to poor communities. Again, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, still on the contextual background, we have to take into account that the Fundraising Act was promulgated in 1978, as we have indicated, almost 45 years ago, and so much has changed. And during that time, this piece of legislation had set up the following funds, that is the Disaster Relief Fund, the State President's Fund, the Refugee Relief Fund, the Social Relief Fund, and the South African National Defence Fund. So all these funds were actually established in terms of this particular piece of legislation. The status of these is as follows. The Disaster Relief Fund is meant to provide assistance to victims and survivors of disaster. The fund itself is active and provides short-term relief to victims of disaster in poor communities. That is its current status. The State President's Fund is meant to provide short-term relief to victims and survivors of acts of terrorism. So since 1994, this fund was activated in 2002 to assist with the burial of a victim of a bomb blast in Soweto, if we still remember the incident of that time. 2 children of the deceased received support from that fund until 2010, when they reached their age of majority and later returned to their country of origin, which is Lesotho. And the Refugee Relief Fund is meant to provide assistance to refugees. It has remained dormant since the new dispensation. The Social Relief Fund is meant to provide funding to organizations providing assistance to victims of violence. The fund was last active in 2001 and has remained dormant ever since. The South African National Defence Force Fund is meant to provide short-term relief to members and their dependents who suffer financial hardship arising from the performance and incapacity of persons when there is a challenge. And now this fund is active and is located with the Department of Defense. As I indicated initially, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, that this is quite a very old piece of legislation. A number of challenges have been experienced in the implementation thereof. This act has become dysfunctional, in other words, over the years, with many parts being repealed owing to, for an example, the introduction of the NPO Act. You will remember that the issue of fundraising now gets to be done by the NPOs themselves over and above the organs of state. So there was an impact when this piece of legislation got to be promulgated in 1977, which has taken some of the functions of this piece of legislation. So only Chapter 2 of the Fundraising Act, that is this legislation that we seek to amend, remains active. And as we have indicated, that there are so many other pieces of legislation following from 1997, that is the NPO legislation being introduced, which had an impact on this legislation. There was also the PFMA that was introduced in 1999, which also has an impact in this, because we'll remember that in terms of the fund management, this sometimes become part of the entities as contemplated in the PFMA, but the PFMA was not taken into account at the time because it was not in existence when this piece of legislation was promulgated in 1978. And from 1999, we also had the Disaster Management Act of 2002, which also had an impact on this piece of legislation because it shifted the whole issue of disaster management to another department, which is actually not social development. And in that way, this particular department, that is the Department of Social Development, is not the primary role player when it comes to such issues, as the Disaster Management Act is administered elsewhere. But now we have to reconcile these issues in order to bring them to the current situation. We must also take into account the issue of the implementation of these issues, which were also affected by the introduction of the Constitution, more especially Section 75 of the Constitution, that is the bills that do not affect provinces, and Section 76, bills that affect provinces. And we also have to take it into account as to what extent does this particular bill affect provinces in terms of management and implementation thereof. Further than that, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, the present relief services as contained in the Fundraising Act are fragmented and costly to administer due to lack of consistency in the application and implementation. So the institutional arrangements as contained in the Fundraising Act are not conducive to respond to issues of emergency when disasters occur. And we know that there are different types of disasters that need, a very quick turnaround time to address. We have a challenge with regard to this particular piece of legislation in the absence of its amendment. So in most cases, the Fundraising Act in its current form duplicates relief services that are catered for by the Social Assistance Act, which is another piece of legislation which has had an impact over and above the pieces of legislation I alluded to earlier. So the amounts of money lie locked in 3 different dormant funds, making it difficult to address wide-ranging emergency situations affecting the vulnerable communities. The 4 boards dealing with issues of relief have been found to be inappropriate in terms of the funds themselves that were established in terms of this legislation, as they are inappropriate and inefficient in terms of addressing the issues of emergency. While the Disaster Management Act enjoins government departments to develop and implement disaster risk mitigation projects, thus reducing the impact of disaster when it occurs, the Fundraising Act itself promotes reactive short-term intervention with no provision for sustainable long-term development, which then is a challenge between these 2 pieces of legislation. Further than that, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, the previous portfolio committees, the National Treasury and Auditor General have raised concerns on the multiple relief funds and their various boards, which impact negatively on the administration and secretariat costs of the department. Because we'll remember that when there is a disaster, when you've got so many funds, there may be a problem of duplicating the services, there may be a problem of the double dipping and all that. So there may be all these kinds of challenges, and there may be inaction on the other side of the board, thinking that the other board has done something. So in that kind of a confusion, there is a need to ensure that such does not happen in the long run. So the funds themselves, as they are in their current form, they the amounts as listed on the screen, but which are dormant and which need to be can you move slide? Which need to be dealt with in terms of the new fund. So the Fundraising Amendment Bill amends the provisions of the Fundraising Act by removing duplication of services inherent in the current relief funds. It also streamlines responses to disasters and allows for risk mitigation and development strategies to be deployed. So the fund will deal with the broad spectrum of socio-economic development issues as determined by the minister. Next slide. So the purpose of this particular bill, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, is to aim to rationalize the Fundraising Act by consolidating the Disaster Relief Fund, the Refugee Relief Fund, the Social Relief Fund, and the State Presence Fund, as I indicated earlier, into one fund, in order, which will be the Disaster Relief and National Social Development Fund, so as to have efficiency in dealing with the issues of disaster management for all the other reasons, as I indicated earlier in the presentation. So this will contribute to the streamlining in terms of the administrative processes and rationalize administrative and secretariat costs to the Department of Social Development. So the newly established Disaster Relief and National Social Development Fund should be empowered to raise funds from the members of the public, private sector, including international donors, who would need to address the short-term intervention and also have an impact on long-term development issues when time of disaster comes. So the amendment itself will align the Fundraising Act with the provisions of the Disaster Management Act and the Public Finance Management Act and other related legislative prescriptions, as I indicated earlier, that there are various forms of such pieces of legislation that have come up after 1978, which have got an impact on the Fundraising Act. Next slide, please. In terms of the Fundraising Act provisions, this slide seeks to indicate the parts that have been amended in the Fundraising Act itself, which is Section 12, which speaks of the minister as Minister of Social Welfare and Pensions. You will remember that this is 1978 we are talking about, and that title does not exist anymore in terms of the new dispensation. Section 17(3), a board shall consist of not more than 15 members, which is the number that we have at present in terms of this board, which needs to be changed due to challenges that we have. Section 18A, the board of the Disaster Relief Fund shall be with due regard to the financial position of that fund and the requirements of each case. to render to persons, organizations, and bodies who are suffering damage or who have suffered damage or loss due to a disaster and all that. Section 20 relates to a issue that the board may, in order to enable it to achieve its objects, collect contributions and may control the collection of contributions by other persons or organizations. And we take into account that the LPO Act has been passed and is already taking care of some of the parts that this legislation deals with. With regard to Section 20, it indicates that a board, in order to be enabled to achieve its objectives, may collect contributions and may control the collection of contributions by other persons and organizations and all such other bodies. This also speaks to the intervention that was brought about by the development or the promulgation of the NPO legislation. And Section 20, subsection 2, deals with the issue of a board exercising powers and functions as may be conferred or imposed in terms of this act. And now we have to align that part with the PFMA because a board now has got the fiduciary duties in terms of the PFMA. We need to take that into account, hence the need to amend that particular provision. Section 25 in its current form speaks to the administrative work, including the receipt and disbursement of money incidental to the performance of the functions and the exercise of the functions of a board. And as I've indicated, that we also had the promulgation of the PFMA in 1999, which has got an impact in terms of how funds have to be handled and managed by the accounting officers or accounting authorities as contemplated in the PFMA Act. Okay. Section 36 relates to the power for the minister to make regulations relating to a number of issues as contemplated in subsection 1 and 2, which relates to the form of any application, authority, temporary authority, permits, and the likes, which need to be received in terms of this piece of legislation, and the issue of the information which shall be included in any report, return, or statement to be furnished. And you must also know that over and above the pieces of legislation that I referred to earlier, we had the promulgation of the Protection of Personal Information Act, which controls the issues of information in the same breath as the right to access to information, balanced with that provision in the Constitution. The financial year of the fundraising organizations or registered branches, which is also impacted by the provisions of the PFMA and the that is the NPO Act. We need to take that into account and balance those provisions along those lines, and any other matter that the minister is expected to prescribe under the circumstances. You must also be mindful of the fact that sometimes some of the issues are not necessarily contemplated in the Act itself or in the regulations themselves, but may be necessary to be regulated speedily, more especially when it comes to the issues of disaster, as they take different shapes and sizes, and may expect the minister to respond in a particular way. So basically, this is what this piece of legislation is currently saying. That is the Fundraising Act. But now, in terms of what we have done in response to the provisions that I have just read out as to what they currently provide in terms of the 1978 legislation, the amendment itself, in terms of clause 1, is looking at the definitions, more especially the definition of a minister, in order to remove the obsolete reference that speaks to social welfare and pensions and all that, as the situation was in 1978. And clause 2 seeks to reduce the number of board members for austerity measures. Remember, we currently have the number of board members who are 15, and we need to reduce those to 10, so that over and above the austerity measures, the board can also be manageable at the end of the day and be easy to take decisions quickly, as disasters need a very punctual turnaround kind of time. Clause 3 seeks to amend Section 18 in order to make provision for the objects of the Disaster Relief Fund, which consolidates all these funds. Because remember, we said we've got all these funds that are currently in existence, but which we need to consolidate into one fund. And clause 3 relates to that. Clause 4 of the bill seeks to amend Section 20 in order to empower the minister to give directions to a board in respect of disbursement of funds. Because remember, one of the challenges is that disasters occur anywhere, anytime throughout the year. And the board must from time to time be able to be advised by the minister in terms of directing them that there's a situation here, this is where we need to prioritize because of reason ABC. Clause 5 of the bill seeks to amend Section 22, mainly to provide for the financial management and control of funds, as I indicated earlier, that when the 1978 Act was promulgated, that is the Fundraising Act, there was no PFMA in mind. So there is a need to harmonize this piece of legislation with the PFMA. Clause 6 seeks to substitute Section 25 of the Provincial Act. The proposed substitution seeks to further provide for the administrative work of the boards and for disbursement of funds managed by the boards established in terms of the Provincial Act, because the issue of disbursement must be very clear as to what must happen, when, who gets what, when do we respond as a department when these disasters happen, how all these have to take into account. Clause 7 of Bill 6 said, Clause 7 seeks to insert Section 25 capital A in the Provincial Act in order to provide for the discontinuation of the existing funds and also the transfer of the available funds to the newly established fund in terms of this piece of legislation. In other words, the following funds that is Section 16. My apologies, Honorable Chair. I just have to pause a bit. I think there is a competing sound elsewhere. So, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, the existing funds that we currently have will cease to exist. And the funds that will cease to exist are the Refugee Relief Fund, the State President's Fund, and the Social Relief. To exist under a new name, which is the Disaster Relief and National Social Development Fund. In other words, once this bill becomes law, we will not be having all those four funds lying all over with different mandates and all that. We'll be having one fund which will have the resources packed in it for the purposes of disbursement during a disaster. So all the amounts credited to any fund referred to in paragraph A, that is the funds that get to be dissolved, will immediately before the effective date vest in the Disaster Relief and National Social Development Fund. so that at the end of the day, these funds get to be manageable and managed under one roof. So any board established by the minister in terms of Section 17 and responsible for managing funds referred to in paragraph A is dissolved, because the minister currently has a power to that effect in terms of Section 78A. So that board, if it is in existence, will be dissolved, and all liabilities and assets thereof, as well as the rights accruing to such funds, will devolve upon the new fund that is being established. In terms of clause 8, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, the bill seeks to amend Section 36 of the Act so as to deal with issues of regulations. As I indicated, that the minister will have powers to make some other regulations which are not catered for currently, for the purposes of being able to respond speedily to any of the challenges that might ensue or from the disaster. And clause 9, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, will provide for the short title of the Act, as it is customary to do so. It is important for us, Honorable Chair, to ask you that you take note of the proposed amendments and continue with the processing of the fundraising amendment bill, which is actually our recommendation to the Provincial Parliament of the Western Cape. We thank you, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that detailed presentation from your side. It is highly appreciated. May I, at this point in time, ask our local officials if there's any input from their side?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Honourable Chair and Honourable Members. The Department would just like to indicate that in July 2021, we submitted comments to the Portfolio Committee via our legal services. And there were a number of clauses in there which we commented on, namely with respect to the size of the board, and which was taken into consideration, and the current amendment bill actually makes took that into consideration as well. There was at that stage issues of a notion of ethical principles, which wasn't really spelled out, but again, thank you to our national department. That was subsequently removed and has been replaced by a different wording in the clause. We also commented on the whole issue of social development activities and empowerment projects, but thank you also to the National Department. That has, I think, to some extent been clarified by the presentation this morning. Honourable Chair, there were comments submitted with respect to the original amendment bill. There were those taken into consideration by the National Department, but we've also subsequently, as early as yesterday, received a notification again from our legal services to provide a written comment on the current amendment bill that has now just been discussed. So the department would also like to request that it again have a look at the bill, noting the inputs provided by the National Department, and submit a written comment, which I think is due with legal services for consolidation on the 29th of May. And I think that will be in readiness, I think, for the meeting of the 5th and 6th of June, where the poll will be discussed. So that's our inputs. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. We note your input. Without any further ado, I don't want to labor and waste any time with regard to discussions. Let me get to our honourable members immediately. Any questions to any of the two departments from the members? No one? Member Fry, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I just have two questions. How much funds are dormant in those three funds that we're talking about, the State President's Fund, Refugee Relief Fund, and Social Relief Fund? And why is this only coming now, whereas we've had one of the biggest disasters that we've had in our history, i.e. COVID-19? Couldn't this not have been done earlier? Thank you.
Honourable, thank you, Member Christopher Fry. Honourable Baku.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chairperson, I commend the national for these amendments, but I would like to ask you questions. Actually, I have only 3 questions, Chairperson, for the department.
You may go ahead.
Am I audible, Chairperson?
Yes, we can hear you clearly, Honourable Baku Vos. As I've said, you may go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, on slide 3 to 4, I would like to know if we can get an explanation of how this act has been used after 1994 and what happened to all the funds that were raised before then. And most importantly, why has it taken the democratic government so long to amend this racist act? That's the slide 3 to 4. And in slide 8 to 9, I would like to know what kind of disasters will be focused on. What are the timelines of these amendments? And will the new act come into effect? As well as what will be the roles and powers of the provinces on this act? And my last question is on slide 15. Can we get more explanation regarding these funds? Does this mean we still have funds that were collected through the Principal Act? And if so, how much are these funds? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Let's deal with these couple of questions first. It's quite a lot for the officials to absorb, and then we can have another round of questions. I note the other hands, Honourable Kasim and others. Officials of National Department, Mr. Njaru, please.
Thank you very much. I think we appreciate the questions. We will ask relevant officials led by DDG Brenda to go through the questions and provide answers. Thank you very much, Brenda.
Thank you very much, DG, and thank you so much to the Western Cape. I guess we forgot to acknowledge, and we do acknowledge the comments that we received before, and we appreciated them, and we did take them into account, as the colleague has indicated. With regards to the specific questions here, one question was how much is dormant. I think we have a slide in the presentation that indicates the funding that is there. The only fund that is not dormant is a disaster relief fund. I don't know if who's slides in the presentation can just show that slide. The reason that those funds are dormant and have not been used over, firstly, those are the funds that basically have been collected and the funds that have been raised previously. And since democracy, there have been some activity, and that is why the amounts are there. I will ask my colleague from who has a better institutional memory than me to be able to talk through some of the activities that have been done. The presentation did indicate the benefits that were provided to the citizens of Lesotho, but there were other activities that were done, which he can describe. And then with regards to why has it taken so long, you'll recall, you will see from the presentation that these amendments are basically responding to other amendments that have rendered this act to be dysfunctional. So, for example, the NPO Act was only done in 1997. Then the PFMA came only in 1999. And the Disaster Management Act, which is the key reason for amending this, it's the overarching legislation, which is dated 2002. So those are the pieces of legislation that needed to inform what amendments must happen to this one, because this was a fund that was established under the apartheid government. So now that all of these other democratic legislation is in place, it's then appropriate to respond to this one. In terms of the operations, the disaster relief fund was active throughout the period since post-democracy. The other funds were not active primarily because we started to experience problems in that the way the legislation is structured was requiring that each of the different funds have to have a board which should then be taking responsibility for providing specific relief. The challenge with that was that because there were not a lot of disasters that are happening affecting those groups, a lot of the funds was now going to just paying board members for attending meetings. And we thought that it doesn't make sense to just be spending money on board fees when the money is intended for beneficiaries of certain who have experienced certain disasters. So the only fund that was left to be active was the social relief fund, and that is the fund that has been, sorry, the disaster relief fund, not the social relief fund. So the disaster relief fund is the only one that was allowed to continue to operate, and it had a board, and it intervened in various disasters that did occur. The nature of the disasters is there's no particular preference of what kind of disaster needs to happen. The only provision was that the fund would only become active when there is a nationally declared disaster. So when there's a disaster at a local level, then the disaster relief fund will not have any responsibility in that regard. And also when there's a provincial disaster, this fund would not have any responsibility. This is meant to be a social development niche to assist in the broader disaster management legislation of the country and disaster management framework and institutional architecture. So it would really be subservient and supportive to the Disaster Management Act. So this one, with the funds that are here, you will see that it's not a lot of money. It would only be available for small supportive interventions that would be done by the Department of Social Development to assist in the broader disaster response of the country. And the primary aim here is to say, instead of waiting for disasters, now that they become more frequent, we are living in an age of climate change, we understand that there's going to be many more disasters. It has become more important, firstly, to raise the funds now, to activate the fund properly and begin to raise more funds because you don't have a lot in that thing. And also to make sure that instead of just reacting, we also become more proactive. We identify communities that are vulnerable and at high risk of experiencing disasters, and that we begin to invest more in mitigation and prevention. And that is why it's important to amend the Act. The timelines is really outside of our hands, I'm afraid. The department has done the draft and so on, but we rely on Parliament to finalize the Act. We are hoping that it will be finalized in the current financial year so that we can then be able to invest. At the moment, until the Act is passed, we are not in a position then to use the funds that are in the other funds except for the disaster relief fund. So it is important that the bill should be passed quickly. I guess in terms of the role of provinces, there wouldn't be a very specific role for provinces in this legislation. It's really a national fund that would respond to nationally declared disasters. Of course, nationally declared disasters would not necessarily be only in Pretoria. They might be in any part of the country. So this fund or the board members of the fund would then have to join, in particular, the determined national Disaster Management Operations Center so that they also participate there. They wouldn't be the primary leaders, they would be coming in a supportive role. So at the provincial level, they would not really have a role per se because this is a national fund. I will invite my colleague to talk to some of the activities that have been done by under this legislation to respond to disasters post-democracy. Mbeni?
Thank you, Chair, and good morning to the honorable members. Maybe to start by indicating that the Act provides for the establishment of these 4 funds, of which most of them, like the three that have been mentioned, are no longer relevant because when these funds were established, they had a specific purpose, which to date, now that we are in a democratic government, they are no longer having a need. Because if you look, for instance, the State President Fund, which was to deal with the issues of acts of terrorism, as well as the social relief, which was to deal with the act of violence. But maybe to come straight to the question that has been posed, in the previous years, we have had a Disaster Relief Fund Board. Hence, we have indicated that the other 3 funds have been dormant ever since. From, I think, the last time that the State President Fund was used was in 2001, if I'm not mistaken, but the Disaster Relief Fund has been actively deployed. For instance, during COVID, the board intervened in terms of providing relief to people who were experiencing the impact of COVID-19, and there was an amount of money was pledged to assist the victims who were suffering from the distress. But then moving along, the board has been always intervening and conducting assessments in disaster-affected areas to recommend intervention, but also to avoid issues of duplication, because you might find that the board might have recommended a specific intervention, but you might find was when we provide the response, we respond as a sector. So the board has also always been mindful to when they intervene to always avoid the issues of duplication. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much for those answers to the questions. Let me open for a second round. I've seen Honorable Kasim. You may go, Honorable Member.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, I really don't think that emphasizing and responding that this fund was established during apartheid explains and covers the fact that thereafter there was still a failure on the department side or delays of funds being distributed to where it needs to be, with it being inactive and dormant, and this while board members were still getting paid as per the previous speaker. And more so saying that the department is not in a position to have used some of the funds until things have been sorted. But let me go back to the Social Relief Fund, which was meant to provide funding to organizations providing assistance with victims of violence. And as per the presentation, which was last active in 2001. Looking at the amount of gender-based cases in South Africa, how has the department failed to keep this specific one inactive since 2001? And how has it been dormant all these years with the amount of issues we have faced daily? And more so, in conclusion, knowing that social development is more than only victims of violence, if I can just get clarity, I think I might have missed it. Once all these funds are under one, will social development still be limited to only victims of violence, or will it cover a range of issues in our society in terms of social development? That's all for now, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Kasim. Any other member? I don't see any indications from other members. Officials, you may answer to Honourable Kasim's remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, honourable members, Chairperson and honourable members. I think in relation to the question that is raised with regard to the social relief funds and the organizations that are dealing with the gender-based violence, I think it was categorically stated that the promulgation of the NPO Act in 1997 has some effect in terms of the fund, because therefore the fundraising by organizations was legalized and we were fundraising using the NPO Act, which allows any organizations that has been registered and given a number to fundraise. Therefore, I think the issue of the organizations dealing with the assisting clients to GPV and any other matters that they do, they were dealing with it under the NPO Act. And that's why I think it is important that with this, the Fundraising Act needs to be amended so that it can deal with issues specifically and it won't become so broad as it was. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that.
Chairperson, there's a response that we didn't give, which Advocate Mchochisa will give on another question.
I didn't grasp that. Just come again, please.
Okay, thank you, Chairperson. It was just to add to what has already been responded to, more especially around the issue of why it took so long.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, that has been responded to. But just to add on my side to say, maybe there has been a shortcoming in this whole system, because in 1996 there was a call after the Constitution was developed to call for the rationalization of the general laws. But unfortunately, there may have been an oversight that time to include this particular piece of legislation. Because you will recall, in terms of the justice rationalization laws of 1996, all the laws that were used in the TPVC states, the self-governing states and South Africa were rationalized, and the situation, a solution was raised in terms of how to deal with those pieces of legislation moving forward. We also had the environmental laws rationalization same year, and we also had the rationalization of the Home Affairs laws during that period. Maybe it would have been that period, where this piece of legislation would also have been brought into the picture, because it was dealing with the issues of the apartheid system. So I just wanted to indicate that, Honorable Chair, that maybe during the development of those rationalization of laws in 1996, 1997, 1998, there may have been an oversight, to deal with this piece of legislation. And again, there was a time when in 1997, there was the NPO Act that was promulgated. Maybe during that time, the entire piece of legislation would have been revisited in order to deal with the issues that are being raised today. Even during 2002, when the Disaster Management Act was promulgated, it may have been an opportunity to also deal with the issues that are raised in this particular piece of legislation. But we missed those opportunities. We must accept that those opportunities were missed, because these funds would have been dealt with during that phase. And now, 45 years later, we are still stuck with the system that we would have dealt with effectively in 1997 already. I just wanted to bring that into picture, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, that there may have been an oversight in terms of the development of the recent pieces of legislation to take cognizance of the issues that this piece of legislation relates. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Any other members that want to give input? Honorable Baku, is it you? No, doesn't seem like it. Look, let me say from my side, these amendments is not very long in nature. It's definitely not the first or the last for us to deal with this amendments. We will have to go to some other parts in the province as well, and some departmental officials from national and maybe province will accompany us. So it's the first bite to these changes, to these amendments. And on this note, if there's no other input, I will say thank you to the National Department of Officials for what they have done this morning. Who is that?
Jadu.
Thank you, sir. You want to give input? Okay.
Yes, just that's to give chair from the provincial, from the National Council of Provinces, chair, is just to outline the process. So to know how we're going to move going forward is that this will be a circle. And then yesterday, as we engage after the bill is being sent to the National Council of Provinces from the National Assembly, was week 1. And today we are engaging provinces in week 2. Then we will also have public hearings on the provinces. We'll engage on public. So just to outline that, Chair, so that we know how we're going to move forward. Thank you very much, Honourable Chair.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's exactly what I've said. It's for us as a committee, our first bite to the amendments. And obviously, we will have to accompany you for some public hearings in some other parts of the province. I'm not so sure if we need to do it right now or our members will stay behind and our members will and obviously with you, Mr. Jalu, if you want to stay behind with us as well so that we can do that and see how best we can move forward with these amendments to other parts of the province for the public hearings. I think let's do it right now and let's get it over and done with. Provincial officials may stay if they wish to stay. They don't need to leave. It's all part of provincial and national government's work. But if you wish to exit, you are most welcome to do that. But the responsible official or two from the National Department will definitely have to stay behind with us so that it will take a couple of minutes and so that we can pave the way forward with regard to the public hearings and know where we stand. Okay, you want to stay? Okay, you are most welcome to stay. Okay, may I ask Mr. Ujari, how do you see the way forward, please?
Okay, Chairperson, as we have come now to, we are actually going to all provinces as the National Council of Provinces to engage provinces, and then the process of the public hearings will be a provincial process where the province will go each province will go to do its own public hearings, and then from the National Council of Provinces we'll be joining you, Chairperson, in terms of those processes. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. It's exactly what I've indicated before. I think leave it with us. We will inform you about our dates and that sort of thing. You don't need to stay as officials. That the honourable members obviously will have to stay for a couple of minutes, and then we carve our way forward as a province. Thank you very much, and thank you officials for being present and for leading the charge with regard to the amendments. You may exit if you so wish. Thank you. I give you 2 minutes, and then the honourable members will discuss the way forward.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Chairperson and honourable members for the discussion. We appreciate the comments, and as a department, we will be available to assist in any cost. Thank you very much.
Thank you. May I, at this point in time, I also don't want to waste any members' time. It's not a hefty exercise. It's actually very simple as far as I'm concerned. Would you leave it up to myself and the administration to deal with the way forward? Nomonde?
Chair.
No, Chair. Unfortunately, this is the committee decision that needs to be decided upon by the members.
Yes, who's that?
Honourable Bagu, Post Chairperson.
Yes.
Thank you, Chairperson. I was going to ask if Nomonde can check our availability If possible, we can come back or we can send the proposed dates to Nomonde, if it's possible. But I would like to propose first if she can check our availability regarding our programs and then set dates where we have space.
Look, we must decide and as a committee, and we must lead the process with regard to this, but I would love the administration to come up with possible dates. And we're getting together again and we then approve the dates. I don't think we can decide on appropriate dates right now. It is not appropriate for us to do so. I think that is for the administration to do. Nomonde?
Can I, Chair? In terms of the legislative process, and the program of the NSOP, the public hearings for this bill will be up until the 9th of June. But what we need now is to advertise, and we need the committee decision now in terms of the number of public hearings and in terms of the areas where those public hearings will be. And that needs to be minuted, unfortunately, in the minutes. And we also need the forms of advertisement in terms of where the committee needs to advertise. That is the committee decision. It cannot be only the decision of the chairperson and the administration. Thank
no
you.
problem. Can I make a recommendation, a firm recommendation? Cape Town is a very big city, and that we have one public hearing session in Cape Town, that we have a public hearing session in Cape Winelands, that we have a public hearing session in the Teerwaterskloof area, that we have a public hearing session in the Berg River area, and maybe the last one, we are going to the George area as a joint committee, social development, and I think education or else, I'm not sure. That is coming. We will be in the Maritzburg, Laingsburg, Beaufort West area, Christopher, if I'm correct. And then while we are there, why not having a public hearing session in that area as well? Then we save time. We don't need to go back for another time period to that area. And that is it. Thanks.
May I, Chair? The joint visit of the Standing Committee on Health and Social Development is scheduled late in June.
Too late.
Very late in June, and I think it's towards the end of June. And by then, this process will be long over. Okay. The committee, if wants to visit those areas that we just mentioned, maybe it can schedule the public hearings there and also do the joint visits. Maybe that is one thing, or we can just stick to the process of the legislation.
Honourable members, do you agree with me with those areas? At least we did identify some areas, and on that basis, then the administration must find the necessary dates to fit in within this time period for us to finalize the amendments. Are you happy with that? Member Barnes? Member Barnes first.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. My hand has been up for quite some time, but I think I'm partly covered after hearing Nomonde, because I wanted to say that we were supposed to be speaking of areas and the amount of people. But Chair, as Nomonde is saying that our joint oversight will be at a later stage, I think we should come back to the drawing board as to say, in the past we've done this, and there are certain areas that we already visited. For example, I think in the Overberg we have visited, was it Karabo? I'm not sure, I just forgot. So now we should look at other areas. For example, I'm thinking the metro is quite a vast area. Of course, we will do that. It won't take much of our time and cost. But I think we should look now also at the West Coast, trying to cover all the regions. I would make a proposal in the Karoo for Laingsburg, since it's a bit closer. I won't go to Beaufort West. So I'm bringing in Laingsburg, and maybe one area in Overberg and one in the West Coast and the Metro and Boland. Then I'm covered. That's my proposal. Thank you.
Honourable Member Barnes, tongue in the cheek. I'm going to tell your people in Maritzburg you don't want the hearing in their area. No, it's not true. I think I tend to agree with you. I think Nomonde have some areas to look at and to find dates around those areas. I've got no problem with that. And I'm not fussy about
My
what
hand is
specific
up
area.
there.
Member Baku, please go.
Thank you, Chairperson. I agree with Member Barnes. In West Coast, I was going to propose Saldana, and then in Poland, I was going to propose Drakenstein.
No
no, she covered me in Karoo, and in Overbeck, let me tool because Honorable Van Vogel is here. Maybe she can give us one area in Overbeck.
I think Nomonde must just check from an admin point of view how many hearings will be sufficient, 4 or 5, that sort of thing. And looking at all the dates, that is already full for the month of June and July. We won't be able to do much more than that.
And the mandate, at the mandate, Chair, the process, our process needs to, the committee needs to come up with the mandate for this legislation on at least before the 12th of June, because it needs to be in the NSOP on the 13th of June.
So we don't have much time. We will have to do that within 12, 14 days time, if I'm not mistaken. Honorable Bosman.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chair, I'd like to propose that we do one public participation process virtually for all NPOs and stakeholder interest groups, and that we also see whether we can cover the 5 district municipalities or whether we can cluster 2 district municipalities together. But I do think a hearing in the Garden Route area would be beneficial, and whether that is George or not, that could cover all of those municipalities. And then that we advertise the public participation in 3 newspapers covering the 3 different languages. And we also ask the WCPP to put it out on their social media, and we send it out to all municipalities and everybody on the stakeholder management database. Thank you, Chairperson.
We note your input, Honourable Member Gillian. The administration noted as well. I think on that note, I said we don't need to labour this one for a lengthy period of time. I think it's very good suggestions. We note the suggestions. I don't think we can finalise the dates right here, right now. That is still for the administration to do. But I think the areas, we have a very good idea of the areas. If we need to get together virtually for a quick meeting to officially agree and make the process official, we can do that. I think we need to give the administration the space to go and find the dates within this very short time frame. I note, Honourable Gillian, your recommendation with regard to 1 or 2 virtual sessions as well. Maybe that is what we will have to do, looking at the very tight time frame we are dealing with. Nomonde, lastly from your side, from the administration side, are you happy with the process so far? Mr. Dasso, you guys happy with that? That is the process?
No, Chair, we're fine. I would have loved the committee to at least give us at least the number. I understand the issue of dates. It's not possible. We've always worked on that outside the meeting, but at least the number of hearings, it's not clear to us. But I take the point that you said we might have to come back. We are just worried about logistics and advertisement.
I think the number of hearings, why it is difficult. The 13th of June is the set date. We will have to do everything from end of May up to the first 10 days of June. That's why I'm saying is that, we give you 4 or 5 areas. You need to identify to us what is advisable within that time span of plus minus 14, 15 days. And then this whole process will have to be completed. If you leave it with us, it might suit We don't have the dates with us right now to say what will work and what not. That is why I'm referring to the administration to assist us in that respect. Nomonde?
I think, Chair, we can, the committee can decide on the dates now. We are on the 17th of May, and I'm looking at this on the dates in front of me on my system. We are only left with almost 2 weeks.
That's what I'm saying.
So I'm worried that if we let the members go now, we are going to be a little bit late in terms of advertisement. We still need to finalize the dates. The advert needs to go out today. I already drafted the advert with the dates. We are just waiting for the dates from the committee. So that if we can book space next week, maybe the advert, the first ad on this bill will appear on the newspaper maybe next week, Saturday, or the week of the 2nd. I don't know, but we do need to get the dates today, members. So maybe the public hearings can be, yeah, maybe the from the 31st or the 30th. I don't know.
Chairperson.
Call for a, Nomonde, go and look at provisional dates. Call for a quick virtual session later today or even tomorrow, that we for half an hour get together and finalize the dates. I don't think it could be expected from us to do it right now. Let's do it rather. That is my firm recommendation to the members, that we call for a very quick
member.
I hear you guys. I have to say this. What I don't understand from the NCOP, that they leave us with very, very tight time frames. I am aware of the bill to come to us 2 months ago. They should have given us the bill to deal with a month, 30 days, 40 days ago already, and they don't do that. And now we're sitting with a time frame problem. Honourable Baku, Honourable Windvogel, please.
No, I was saying a member Windvogel hand is up.
Okay, Honourable Windvogel, sorry,
thank
you must go.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, mine is just a proposal that when Nomonde look at dates, we must give her permission also to look at our constituency days, because of the short period of time, and most of us are busy during the other times. If there's a classic, we must also give her permission to use those dates. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. I actually agree with that. We have the areas. You have areas to work with. That is a firm recommendation from this committee. We can work around those areas. It's only the dates.
29 May until we will see which dates.
The 29th of May until the
9th of June.
The 9th of June. That is the date time frame we have. So you can see how tight it is. Okay. Guys, are you happy with that? Mr. Daso, from the admin side, you are happy?
Hello, Chair.
Thank you so much.
Chairperson.
Let's make it for 4 or 5 set public hearings.
How many?
4 or 5. Mr. Daso, is it too tight for 5?
It's a committee decision. It's up to the committee. It's based
that's why I say you must go and help us first and come back, and we can ratify it officially during a virtual session. We don't need to come back here into the house. Yeah, you must help us. Mr. Njalo, or what is the surname again? Jadu. Sorry, my friend. Please.
Jadu, Honourable Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Njalo.
Chairperson, I think on the point that in terms of the time frames, I will speak out of I'm only the chairperson of the committee in the National Council of Provinces for 2 weeks, and I had to hit the ground running. So the timeframes are for all provinces. So we understand, Chair, that in terms of the tight timeframes.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
No, don't worry. We will help you. We always help the NCOP. and to make it work from our side. You don't need to worry about that. Gillian, is it a fresh hand?
Yes, Chairperson. Chair, I just wanted to add and say that there's no need for us to have another meeting to confirm the dates. Once you and Nomonde have done that, you can just email us. We will keep our calendars open.
Thank you so much for that. Honorable Baku, again, is that a fresh hand?
They're all good, Chairperson. Sorry.
Thank you. Honorable Windvogel, is that a new hand or a old hand? Okay.
Like I think,
yeah, I think once we have the dates from the administration, we will communicate it no more almost immediately. We will work around the 29th of May up to the 9th of June. And we will just have to fit it into our diaries. We don't have a choice. Thanks for your cooperation, guys. You may go. The meeting is then closed. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Bye-bye, colleagues.
Come, let's go for my cup of coffee. That is what I need now.